Something that has not been great basketball, the Atlanta Hawks.
Oh,
it's been rough, man. It has been just all right. I have a theory, and I recognize it's going to sound stupid on the surface, but I actually believe in this. This isn't like the overtime
conspiracy
rule.
theory hour,
No, not conspiracy theory,
or just crazy idea hour.
It's not. No, it's not that. It's you shouldn't have done this.
Okay.
The Hawks should not have gone to the conference finals 2 years ago. They made a mistake by going to the conference finals, and part of that is the Sixers problem because the Sixers collapsed. Part of that's Ben Simmons. Part of that's Embiid and all the Doc Rivers, all that. But it threw expectations out of whack. It threw things to a situation where the Hawks thought they were further along than they are. And we heard from Trae Young last year about how it's hard to get up for these games when you've been in the conference finals. And we've talked about, like, buddy, that's the job. Like, that's what it's supposed to be, right? And we saw what happened with them finally firing Nate McMillan this past week. And it looks like they're going to replace him with Quin Snyder. As of this recording, nothing is done yet, but it looks like that's the hire, right? And so, Trae, I want to ask you, in terms of this Hawks scenario, where do we put Trae Young in all of this? Because he's talking about, like, he's making public comments like, hey, I'm not involved in all that stuff. I have no, I don't want to, like, I just do my job and everything. It's not really true, right? But publicly, I don't think he has to admit to everything that's going on either. He also said, like, I just let you guys, talk about media and everything. Like, I just let you guys, like, make up your own stories and then, whatever. And I don't think he necessarily has to set us straight on what's going on behind the scenes either. Like, again, that's in-house stuff. And he seems like the kind of guy that wants to keep that stuff in-house. But there is a leadership problem throughout this entire organization. And I don't doubt Trae Young's talent. I don't doubt his impact on the floor. I just wonder, like, how do you make this work when your guy continues to seem to have problems with how he's coached?
I think it's the star cadence, though, right? And although a couple coaches got fired under Devin Booker's watch, but this is similar, right? You got a very good basketball player who's on the cusp of being an all-star. He's been an all-star, luckily, early on in his career, unlike Devin had to go through a couple growing pains in the tough West, right? But sometimes just because you're a star player doesn't mean you're a great leader.
That's
and
true. Yeah.
You see the culture shifted when they got Monty Williams, a coach who could also lead a team to battle, but also landed a coach on the floor in Chris Paul. So now that relieves all duties, right? You trade for DeJounte Murray. You got John Collins, who you've been dangling for the past
since he got drafted.
He's already on the trade block for next season. Like, it's not.
What I mean? So there's tons of inconsistencies. There's no vet in the locker room. There's no accountability. Nate McMillan did his best at the job. Obviously, there's some conflict. Player always wins this situation. You know what I mean? But I think they need some real leadership over there. I'm not sure, but also it has to be someone Trae Young respects.
Right.
And that's a whole nother thing, because you can have a guy that's decorated and they clash. And it's like, well, this is my team. And although that, like, I mean, it comes with the star treatment of that's how it's a players' league. With Quin Snyder, maybe there will be some accountability, but then you also have to think about, is he going to buy in? Right?
Yeah.
There's a honeymoon stage. And luckily, if he is hired after this recording, the Hawks are home for 2 weeks. So that means you get practice time, you get some familiarity with guys, learning new sets and whatever whatever the vision is there in Atlanta, then they can potentially move forward. Like you mentioned, the whole lackluster involvement after making the conference finals. He's silly to think that way. Any sport is very difficult. I mean, LeBron James has been a very good basketball player for a very long time, and possibly on eyes made it 8 trips to the finals look normal. It was very difficult to do, whether win or lose.
Crazy, man. It's still
I don't think people give that enough credit for how absolutely absurd that is. He played like 3 extra seasons because of that.
Yeah. And that's the thing that you have to even think about on that behalf, right? And guys watching it don't appreciate it until they're in their moment. Or you're looking later on down your career. You think about Tracy McGrady's career, who's a very good scorer, very individual player, but really never made it outside the first round as the lead guy, and finally made it to the finals as a bench guy with the Spurs. He was hooking arms towards the end of his career. You know what I mean? So guys take that for granted because they think that it, they never look at the outside moment of it, right?
Right.
It's like you being the lead podcaster, and now you go to another network, and I'm like, Zach was holding me back, not understanding your gravity.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I agree. I'm really good.
In the Trae Young Hawks situation, they don't respect the whole thing of looking at injuries.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Team just kind of slipping up and getting caught.
Shit happening, right? Sometimes shit just happens. Right. Yeah.
It takes a little bit of luck. And I compared them to the Portland Trailblazers making it to the Western Conference Finals that one year. Yeah. Right? Yeah. It's not like, hey, we got a team. It's like, no, this dude was out. This dude is out.
Yeah, exactly.
This dude is out. You guys are good. Don't get it wrong. I'm not taking away from your individual success, but look around and be honest with yourself. How was that season and what worked?
Right. So Mo, there was a sound. I did radio this morning. There was a sound that we played from last night from the Pacers game, and Rick Carlisle talked about Tyrese Halliburton, and he was like, he's like, this is him. Like he calls about 98% of the plays out there, which to think of Rick Carlisle allowing a point guard to call all those, like that percentage of plays. If he had said 9% of the plays out there, I'd been like, nah, man, that's too high. Like that's
a young point guard too.
Yeah. And this is a young point guard. Like this is how highly he thinks of him. Right. And so he allows Tyrese Halliburton to kind of call that out. And I know Trae Young, by all accounts, likes to call out what they're going to do. If they're bringing in Quin Snyder, who has a fucking encyclopedia for a playbook, it's like Quin Snyder has anytime I've talked to, like when I was in Salt Lake City, and anytime I talked to people about Quin Snyder, opposing coaches, they're like, man, we have to do so much prep because of how extensive that playbook is. Quin Snyder, I don't know that he's necessarily a control freak in the same way that a Rick Carlisle is, but he's gonna want to find a balance between having his shit run, which probably happens more next season, right? Because that's going to be hard to implement everything when he takes over, assuming he takes over. But finding that balance of Trae gets to do what Trae wants to do, but we run what I want to run, that's going to be a really difficult thing. And I look at, I think you're going to see short-term improvements in terms of Quin Snyder taking over. I think it's a different mentality than a very kind of laid-back approach that Nate McMillan has even for an old school guy. But man, I look at that and I'm like, I like Quin Snyder as a coach. I don't know that that's the right mix.
We need AI voice creator to get Pat Bev to say Quin Snyder got some shit.
Yeah.
Quin Snyder got some shit.
No, he does. I think the important thing first, I think the offense he's got to bring is the early Jazz offense that he had, where the ball was flying around, everybody was moving and things like that. It kind of ended up being just a high pick and roll offense with Mitchell and Zach's favorite player, Rudy Gobert, in the whole towards the end of that run. But that's the important offense of it. I think Quin's a good coach for them. Because I think I think this is Trae's last chance as a Hawk player. Honestly, I think
does he give a shit about that though?
That's $1 million question, Zach. And I don't know however much he makes the question. Yeah. He might not. That's a whole other thing. But that's what the Hawks need to figure out. Yeah. Because listen, they got DeJounte Murray, and the move had to have been, you're going to be off ball more, but you got to be more involved when you're off ball. He's still doing the thing where he stands out at half court after he gives up the ball. And sure, now it's 4-on-4 because defenses are still guarding him, but it's also their best offensive player not involved in the action, where he's not an option anymore. And that becomes an issue for them. And then when DeJounte Murray doesn't have the ball, he's not as much of a threat, standing in the corner or whatnot, and it makes things difficult. Trae's got to realize it's time for that. I think Quin's going to be the right guy for this job. I think he's the guy it's going to get them moving, going to get their offense going. And again, it's so tough to do that in season this year. We'll see it next year more than anything else, but that's really the question. I think he's the guy, Zach. I think he's a good fit for them. He's who I probably would have been going for afterwards, but Trae's got to get serious about this stuff, where he's got to look at it going I got to be part of the team here. And I can't just be, the offense can't just be me high pick and roll the entire time. I think he's really good at it. It's unbelievable.
Dude, he's an incredible player.
Unbelievable. It's no question about it. It's not a shot at that, but you can't run it all game.
Right. And which I think like Hawks fans or Trae Young fans will be like, oh, you guys are hating on him and everything. The thing is, like, we think he's so good that there's more depth to his game. Like, if this was, I'm going to throw somebody under the bus here. If this was Monty Morris, right? Who I like a lot. But if we were demanding this out of Monty Morris, right? Like a very middle of the road point guard. Man, I feel
is he middle of the road?
Yeah, man, he's a solid starting point guard. I'm really shitting on a guy I like a lot, but it's the first name that came to my Monty. I'm sorry, but if this was Monty Morris and we're doing, you got to do this, you got to like, it would be fucking ridiculous, right? Ish Smith, fucking ridiculous to say things like this. Trae Young is so good, you do expect more out of him. You do want more for him because his talent is the type of player that can do special things on a grander scale than what we've seen, and just making a conference finals because Ben Simmons short-circuited and the Sixers shit themselves on national TV is not an accomplishment. It's just not. Like, especially after the last season and a half you've had, it's not an accomplishment anymore.
It's not even like they've built a bad team around him. I love the team itself.
This should work.
Bogdanovich, yes. Clint Capella as your role man, Okongwu coming off the bench. You have DeAndre Hunter. You have a lot of pieces around you.
And also, but Mo, real quick, just to cut you off, like, it's not to put it all on Trae Young either. There are other issues within this organization, but you are the face of the franchise. And that's what the money is for.
And part of the problem is, I think the franchise, after the conference finals, they're not only did they start sipping on their own success and thinking that was enough, I think they just turned everything over to Trae and starting to cater to Trae at that point. And I felt like that's where a lot of stuff, they let him slide with some things and things like that.
I don't blame Trae for that. I blame the organization.
Like, it's the organization's fault. Yeah, it's the organization's. That's exactly. I'm not you're letting me do this. Okay, no problem. Like that's not on Trae in that sense, right? And we've seen a ton of star players do it, but I think this is also a problem in the NBA. A lot of teams turn their organizations over to these guys too early, when they haven't had enough success and enough of a track record where you feel like, okay, this is sustainable and he gets it.
Also, there's maybe like 5 guys in the league that should have the organization turned over to him.
Yes.
Like, that's the other problem, right?
I mean, we can go layers deep in this.
Yeah.
That's a whole other pod, I guess.
and I mean, no, it would definitely go into a whole nother pod because that falls into the superstar talk.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's tiers to it where you're just an all-star. And then there's also the development. You know what I mean? Like, not grow on the job. There's learn on the job
like
type
organizations set up these stars to fail, right? Like, I kind of think that's what the Hawks have done here with Trae Young. But at the same time, like, it's on he's got to be better. They've got to be better. I mean, shit, 3 months into the season last year, 2 months into the season last year,
I would say
Travis
small
Schlenk
wins.
was like, I shouldn't have brought these guys back together. That's wild.
I mean, that was such an insane comment. That was such an insane comment with all of that. Like, it's just, like, okay, that's something for us to say. You don't admit it.
I know, man.
That's not out loud.
Yeah.